Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. It's becoming more and more expensive to own a car these days. Between gas prices and the cost of repairs, it can really add up.
And depending on where you live in the country, the cost of owning a car can vary greatly. So what states are some of the cheapest places to own a car? What states are the most expensive? And where does Arizona, the Copper State, fit into the mix?
For that answer, we're talking with David Straughn. He's with Automoblog. It's an automotive publication that keeps readers informed and up to date on driving. And the research they just released reveals where your money is going when it comes to driving.
This is On Your Side with Susan Campbell and Gary Harper, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Okay, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
Hello, Miss Campbell.
How are you doing today?
We're doing okay, You know, we're talking about cars today.
You love talking cars.
I love cars. I love vehicles. I love NASCAR, but that's an old topic. We've already talked about that.
We have a little bit, but I didn't get a chance to tell you. We actually took my son to his first race.
Oh, wow.
It was out in Phoenix.
Yeah.
My parents flew in
Yes.
to take him. Oh, my goodness.
What did he think?
He loved it.
Really?
Loved it. And like the first time when the green flag dropped, his eyes were really wide.
Yes.
He watched all the cars speed by, and he just looked at me, and he just got this giant grin and goes, "Wow, that was a lot of cars."
Please tell me you had headphones on them.
We had earplugs and then headphones over, so
Yes.
he was double protected.
He was
for
double
that.
protected. Yeah.
And I have to say, the people at the Phoenix Raceway were amazing. There were a couple of people that came up to him and gave him little lug nuts that had come off the car. So he has this memory that's going to last a
Very
lifetime.
cool. Did you go on a Saturday or Sunday?
We went on Saturday, so it was a little calmer.
Yeah, that's the Xfinity.
Quieter,
so
yeah.
some of they've got really good racers, drivers.
He had a blast.
Well, good for him. Yeah. So, and how old is he?
He's 4.5.
4.5.
But we had the passes, so he was out on pit road. Like he had a fantastic time.
Yeah, once you do the passes like that and you're down with the drivers and
You can't
everything,
go back.
You can't go back. I did it one time, and I'm down there with Austin Dillon. I mean, I was in his car driving
Just hanging
with
out.
him,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I could never go back to the stands now. I'm spoiled.
I know.
This is
no
nuts.
kidding.
So yeah, NASCAR, very expensive, but let's just talk about, our cars.
The regular cars, the less cool cars.
The less cool cars, depending on which vehicle you drive. So how many vehicles do you have?
Just two. My husband has one. I have one.
All right, just enough to get around. Hey, listen, that 4.5-year-old is going to be 16 before you know it.
Come on, stop that.
I have 4 cars.
Do you really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, 4 cars.
Tell me what they are.
Well, 2 of them are my sons. So the youngest has a 2020 Volkswagen. The oldest has a 2017. I should know this.
Oh boy.
Ford Focus.
Okay.
And I drive a Cadillac, and my wife drives a BMW.
Cool.
So, but
you've got the whole. You don't have a brand loyalty.
no, I'm all over the map. Yeah, just kind of like you're looking around. You're like, I like that car.
I love it.
So, and you drive a Jeep.
Yeah,
What's the hubby drive?
a Jeep.
Oh,
And before that, I had a Jeep. I'm a Jeep person.
That's like the bumper sticker. It's a Jeep thing. What is it
I
about
don't know.
being a Jeep thing?
Well, my last Jeep, I had one of those really old boxy Cherokees.
Yeah.
And I got it to like 220,000 miles. And that sealed the deal for me. I was like, if I can get this car to 220,000 miles with all of the abuse that I've put it through, they've won my affection.
I had a Ford pickup truck, and I got up to 185,000 miles.
Nice.
It was not a problem at all. All I would do is oil changes, gas, tires. That's it. But it got up to 185,000. I'm like, I'm really pushing my luck here, and I wound up selling it. And as soon as it drove off of my driveway, I was like, was this a mistake or not?
Oh, it was. That poor car missed you.
Yeah, I mean, it treated me very well.
Yeah.
185,000.
Oh,
I
man.
got rid of it. But anyway, you got to move in and you got to move on to better things,
I guess.
But anyway, the cost of owning cars very expensive. I mean,
sure is.
We know that. I mean, we have insurance and of course the big one, gas prices, and it really depends on where you live in the United States. Kind of dictates the cost of
Can make a huge difference.
Can make a huge difference, yeah. So for more on that, we're talking to David Straughn. He's with Automoblog. That's a publication that kind of keeps viewers or readers, I should say, informed about vehicles and driving. How are you today, David?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. I hope y'all are doing the same.
Yeah. You did some research, or at least the publication did some research on the cost of owning a car depending on which state. What did you, so what were the parameters that you guys looked at when it came to putting a price tag on state by state?
Some of the main costs that we feel are just regular costs that are the same for everybody, that everybody has to pay, are the cost of car insurance, the cost of property tax and registration fees. The average cost of repairs was a big one. That's one that I think a lot of people don't think about. And then also the cost of gas. Those were kind of our main categories.
It's so interesting that the cost of repairs can vary from state to state. Why is that?
That really surprised me as well. And I actually learned that in writing another article about, it's a long story, but writing an article sort of about like warranty legislation that's moving through in other states like Colorado. And so I think that the main reason for that is just cost of living differences between places. So places with a higher cost of living typically have to pay higher wages to workers. And then I'm sure that there's some other variables there that are a little more hidden to us. But I think that cost of labor, as it relates to kind of like cost of living in certain areas, is a big factor there.
So we're going to go state by state here in a little bit, but tell us, what state do you live in, and how expensive is it there to own a car?
Well, I live in the beautiful state of North Carolina. That is great in a lot of ways, but as far as the cost of car ownership, we are number 5 in terms of the most expensive states in the union. I just had to renew my registration, so I had a nice little reminder of that very recently.
Wow.
And yeah, the big one for us actually is repair costs. We're like among the top states in the U.S. for the cost of repairs. I think that's, largely due to the cost of living having gone up here a lot in recent years. And also the cost of gas is quite high here, I think mainly due to our tax structure.
This is when we start recruiting him to come visit Arizona, because it turns out we are pretty close to the very bottom of the list in terms of cost to be a car owner.
Right.
Even though we do have really high gas prices, we're toward the top of the list of gas prices nationwide. But overall car ownership, not so bad.
It's always bad to be at the bottom of the list, but when it comes to this list, I'm glad where
not
Arizona
so bad.
is. What are we, like 48? Is that correct?
Yeah, 48. That's correct, 48th. So our list includes the District of Columbia, so that's 48th out of 51.
Wow.
And Arizona in general, the only category in which Arizona is like above average is in the repair cost score. So I'm not super familiar with the cost of living in Arizona, but I would imagine in cities like Phoenix and Flagstaff and stuff, they probably might push that average up a little bit.
When you say repair costs, how do you crunch those numbers? I mean, what really factors into repair costs?
So we got cost data from a private source that basically like analyzed the average sort of expenditure on a check engine light service. So that can be anything from somebody just saying like, oh, there's a misfire in the in the electronics, it's just giving you a false reading, to your engine's about to explode and we have to do some emergency stuff on it. So so it kind of encompasses a pretty wide range of things. We thought that was probably the best data point for us to use for that, because it's just very inclusive and very consistent from one place to the next.
The check engine light can be a scary moment.
Oh, gosh.
Because just like David said, it could be as minor as your gas cap isn't on tightly enough, or it could be your engine is about to explode and you're going to...
And honestly, how much of a relief is it when it's the gas cap thing?
That's happened to me
You
before.
feel a little silly, but you're so happy to feel silly that it's okay.
Actually, I experienced that. The check engine light went on. I was like, oh my God, what kind of expense is this going to be? And I found out it was the gas cap. And I was like, dodge that bullet.
So we have to go through this list. What are the top 5 most expensive places to own a car?
Well, let's but without looking at your cheat sheet there, what would you guess would be the top?
The state that automatically comes to my mind, because it's the most expensive in every other area, California.
That's a good guess. I would have also, so I moved here, from Rhode Island. And in Rhode Island, we had something called the car tax, which nobody has ever heard of here in Arizona. And it's a property tax on your vehicle. So every single year you pay a property tax, and it's based on the value of the car. And it's a ton of money. I mean, like for my old 2006 Jeep Cherokee, every quarter I was paying an extra like $150 property tax, car tax.
Annually.
$150 a quarter.
Oh,
so
a quarter. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And so if you owned like a beautiful luxury vehicle, you could be paying thousands of dollars a year for the privilege to own the car you already bought.
Is that the only state that does that?
There are a couple others, I believe, that do kind of similar property taxes and car taxes, right?
Yeah, that's true. And it kind of just depends. So we kind of rolled like registration fees and property tax into one thing. So there are a few states that have similar, like New Jersey has a similar tax to the one that you're talking about in Rhode Island, and they ended up being the most expensive in that category. So both of your guesses are inside the top 10.
Okay.
California came in. Yeah, not bad. California came in at number 2 overall, which kind of surprised me as well for the same reasons. But Rhode Island came in at number 9.
Okay.
Number 1 was Connecticut, right next door there to Rhode Island.
Interesting.
And unfortunately for people in Connecticut, they are pretty high in just about every category that we studied there. And what we did with our study was to kind of normalize things. We took the raw cost data and we applied it to basically a 100-point scale to kind of normalize it, just to make it easier to compare, numbers from one to the other and give a more direct comparison. So we also have some deviation of costs from the averages and stuff like that. So at number 1, we have Connecticut. Number 2, we have California. Number 3 is Michigan, and that is almost entirely due to the exorbitant rates that Michigan drivers pay for car insurance. It's not super expensive in almost any other category, but they have they're an outlier in terms of car insurance costs.
Yeah,
sure.
I used to live in Michigan, and the insurance up there is crazy high. They have what's called a no fault state, meaning if you rear end my car, my insurance pays for it, even though it's your fault. It's a no fault state. It sucks.
And that's why insurance companies have high rates, because even if you're a good driver, they can't evaluate your driving. They're just evaluating the overall driving history of the state.
So you're even as a good driver, you're tossed into the mix.
There's
with
no
the
discounts
bad,
or anything.
There's no discounts. Yeah, so you get kind of screwed on that, and I've experienced that.
Okay, so Connecticut, California, Michigan. Next one is Hawaii. That makes sense. They generally have higher prices for a lot of things, especially gas.
That's right. And gas, so you're spot on. Gas, they are number 1 in the country for most expensive gas. And that is the main thing that pushed them up, because they're relatively average for other costs there. And then rounding out the 5th one, as I mentioned earlier, is North Carolina. So for us, that's, repair costs are kind of the big thing for us there. And we're just kind of relatively high for most things here in North Carolina.
So let's talk about some of the least expensive states. What's the least expensive state to own a car when you put all the factors in together?
Well, the least expensive state in our study was wild and wonderful West Virginia. The only repair cost is the only category in which West Virginia was higher than average. And even there, they're 1.6% higher than average for us there. So everywhere else, all the other factors are relatively inexpensive in West Virginia. And then just a little bit more expensive than them is Ohio. And Ohio's kind of only sort of expensive category is in the property taxes. They
have property taxes then in Ohio?
I grew up there. I don't remember. I don't remember paying that, but it certainly could have changed since I moved out. And I also wasn't paying for my car. My parents were paying for it when I lived there.
You were just a little girl. So you wouldn't know.
No.
And then behind them is Idaho. And then Idaho, again, repair costs were kind of the only place where they were expensive. Everywhere else, they're very low, very far below the averages. And then is Arizona, right there at would be the fourth cheapest state.
What category helped us make number 4? What brought us to that nice low level?
Brought you down. Okay, all right. So the car insurance is relatively inexpensive. It's just about 17% lower than average in Arizona. Also, surprisingly, I mean, you may have a different experience. Our research showed us that gas was about 10% cheaper than average in Arizona. We pulled our data for this in February, so things may have changed since then. And then, yeah, I mean, even though repair costs are kind of like slightly above average, they are still only slightly above average. So Arizona in general is just relatively low across the board.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
But
I still want to pay less. Do you have any advice for drivers who are going to look at this and say, my goodness, I still would like to save money because I can't make ends meet right now? What's the way to save?
Well, I think I first would like to say that it's important to recognize that owning a car anywhere in the U.S., really anywhere in the world, is just very expensive. And so, you know, when we want to say something's like the least expensive state, it's not to like diminish the cost and kind of the burden of owning a car. So one of the reasons we focus on costs at Automoblog is like it is expensive and people are kind of struggling right now. So to save money, like there are some things that you can affect, and unfortunately, like most of that is just kind of like how much you drive, how much gas you use, and also like your insurance. So you can lower your insurance rates by kind of going with like minimum insurance policies. That does, however, leave you kind of exposed to some financial risks. So like as somebody who studies that, like I wouldn't really recommend saving money in that way. I think that kind of one of the best answer is just to drive less if you can. That like, yeah, that's really hard in this country, definitely outside of a few cities. But driving less means you're spending less on gas. It means you're putting fewer miles on your car, which means that you're less likely to need repairs. All of that.
Less likely that you'll get into an accident. You know, if you just leave the car in the garage, less likely to. Yeah, well, think about that. If you just leave the car parked, which who does, but you'll pay less in insurance because you won't get into a wreck. You won't pay gas because you're not driving anywhere. You won't have a repair bill because you're not driving it around to break it.
We need to start an on-your-side carpool.
Yeah, but you're on the other side of the. I mean, you're
we
way
live as
east.
Far away from each other as possible. I know.
Yeah, how far are you from the station, east-wise?
Like 35 minutes in one direction, and you're like 35 in the other, right?
Yes, completely opposite directions. Yeah, I think you planned that on purpose. When
I
you,
did.
When you
yep.
moved. Yeah.
I moved here, and I said, I'll live anywhere except where Gary Harper lives.
I got to get away from Harper. All right. Hey, listen, David, thank you so much for being on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to know more about you or maybe automotive, Automoblog, that's easy for me to say.
I told you that would happen.
It's a mouthful. Don't worry about it. It happens.
Yes.
I do that several times a day.
Is there a website or anything they can go to?
Yeah, automoblog.net. Come check us out. We have a lot of like the traditional car stuff, like car reviews and everything, but then we also have a lot of like really in-depth data studies, and I'd like to think that we're trying really hard to represent like car owners beyond just like car dudes. You know, we're really trying to like offer resources to people like regular folks who drive cars that aren't necessarily like super into them as a thing, but really information that's useful for folks that just need their car to get from point A to point B. So yeah, check out our website. We have new stuff coming out all the time.
I was on the website earlier today. It's very impressive. A lot of information, and it's good reading. So, hey, David, thank you so much for being on the On Your Side podcast, and enjoy yourself over in North Carolina. And listen, drive less, okay?
I'll do my best. But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'd love to come back sometime if you ever need to chat cars again.
You got it.
Will
Thank
do.
you. The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.